Hey guys, tonight we're brushing our way into the quiet heart of Edo-era Japan, a place where even your toothbrush could earn you honor or shame. Sounds ridiculous? Well, wait until you hear about the time someone actually got kicked out of a tea ceremony because their breath wasn't up to par. Yep, you wouldn't have survived. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, tell me where and when you're listening from. Midnight in Montana? Dawn in Da Nang? Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're standing in a room that smells faintly of wet cedar, charcoal, and something earthy like boiled roots and burnt silk. The walls are darkened from decades of steam and smoke, and the small window in the corner lets in just enough gray morning light to silhouette the figure at the workbench. The man's hands move slowly, precisely. He doesn't look up when you step inside. His fingers are busy weaving a thin cord of twine through the hollowed handle of a bamboo stick. At the other end, tiny bristles made from boar hair bleached in lye spread like the whiskers of a wise catfish. You watch him dip the brush into a clay pot of ash powder paste, press it to his palm, then nod once. Good balance. Not too stiff, not too soft. This is his final brush. Not the last one he'll sell. Oh no. The last one he'll ever make. The last one crafted by hands that have moved through 62 New Years and 17 earthquakes. You were sent to collect the batch and bring them to the vendor at Nihonbashi. But now that you're here, something about the moment feels heavier. Like the steam in the air has thickened. He finally speaks. I was 12 when I made my first, he says without turning. His voice is cracked, but not weak like an old bell. Used broom straw, cut my lip with it. Still remember the taste of blood and pine resin. You nod, unsure if he's talking to you or to the brush. The bench is covered in half-finished handles, bits of horsehair, thin copper wire, and broken combs. This isn't just a workshop, it's a memory palace. Every object on the shelves tells a different story, like that cracked ivory brush from the old nun who demanded bristles soft enough to whisper, or the thick-handled one for a wrestler who broke 2 teeth chewing miso that had gone bad. You see a faded piece of parchment nailed to the beam. It reads, "A clean mouth reflects a clear mind. Signed, Shogunate Health Council, 1791. No pressure, right?" You reach for one of the newer brushes, slim, elegant, carved with a single sakura petal, and your thumb grazes a fresh nick on the bamboo. Still sharp. The craftsman clears his throat and finally looks at you. His eyes are pale blue-gray, like worn river stones. You know what most people forget? He says. You shake your head. It's not about the brush. He lifts one, holds it to the light. It's the hand that holds it. That's where the habit lives. That's where the shame begins. You blink. Okay, that felt a little intense for a morning pickup, but sure. Outside, you hear the first stirrings of the street vendors setting up stalls. A child shouting about kites. A crow laughing like it knows a secret. But here, inside this room, time feels like it's made of paper thin, delicate, and full of folds. The craftsman gestures for you to sit. And so you do. For the next while, you just listen. He tells you how brushes used to be made from deer tail, and how the practice was banned after a particularly furious daimyo declared deer to be sacred guardians. You hear about a rival maker who swore by squirrel hair. Terrible absorbency, but it tickled the gums in a way some courtesans liked. He even shows you an old metal mold, rusted now, shaped like the open mouth of a dragon. It was once used to test brush width, ensuring no bristle got too ambitious. You laugh softly. He doesn't. Then there's the story of the emperor's cousin, who demanded his brushes come with a personal poem carved into the handle. 37 syllables on a stick the size of your finger, the old man mutters. Almost made me blind. A breeze moved through the room, lifting the edge of a linen cloth, revealing a basket of discarded handles. Each one failed in its own way: cracks, misaligned holes, uneven splits. You wonder what would happen if your own failures could be stored like this, neatly bundled and hidden under cloth. Finally, the old man places the last brush on a tray. 20 brushes in total, each one unique. Each one holding within it not just hygiene, but history. And then he stands. He moves slowly, but not unsteadily. He wipes his hands on a towel that used to be white and walks to the door. "You'll carry them, won't you?" he asks, not meaning just physically. You nod. Of course. He places the lid on the box and hands it to you. The wood is warm from the morning air, lighter than expected. He gives a small bow. "Tell the vendor this is my final batch, no more." You step outside. The street is brighter now, busier. Someone's frying fish. The smell curls around your nose and makes your stomach grumble. 2 children run past, their mouths still white with morning paste. A woman on a step stoops to spit, with the elegance of a crane dipping into a stream. You glance back at the small doorway, but he's already gone inside, closing it behind him like he's folding the last page of a long story. You carry the box toward Nihonbashi, feeling the light sway with each step, and you think, maybe the man was right. Maybe the hand matters more than the brush. Maybe this quiet little craft lost somewhere between rice balls and sword. Polishing was always a kind of art, a private kind. Some historians still debate whether personal. Hygiene in Edo, Japan was truly superior to that of Europe during the same period. The truth, as always, depends on whose teeth you're inspecting. You pass a cart selling fresh mint leaves. The scent hits you like a memory that hasn't happened. Yet and ahead, the bridge market waits, bustling, loud, and full of mouths. The box is heavier now, not because it's gained weight, of course not. But as you walk through the streets toward the polishing house, dodging morning rushers and errant chickens, there's something about knowing you carry the final brushes of a man's life that makes your shoulders ache a little more than they should. The stall at Nihonbashi took the box eagerly. Too eagerly, perhaps. The vendor barely glanced at the signature seal burned into the lid before handing over a slim packet of coins and shouting something about discounted teeth powder. You didn't have time to argue. The real task was waiting deeper in the city, down an alley that even the cats don't bother with anymore. The steam hits before the doorway does. It pours from the slats in the roof and coils around the wooden eaves like smoke from a sleeping dragon. The building is squat and dark, tucked behind a tofu shop and a place that sells strange amulets you're pretty sure are just rocks with holes in them. You push the door open. Instantly, you're swallowed by a wall of heat and scent. Wet straw, boiled fat, singed hair, vinegar. And beneath it all, a deep mineral tang that clings to the back of your tongue. You cough. "Late," a voice grunts. Squint through the haze. A woman stands over a cauldron the size of a bathhouse tub, her sleeves rolled above the elbow, revealing forearms like temple pillars. She's stirring something thick and bubbling with a paddle that looks better suited for river work. "They're not mine," you say, gesturing to the wrapped bundle you carry. "Craftsman's final batch," I thought. "I know whose they are." She doesn't look up. He sent word. You're unsure if that makes you feel better or worse. Steam rises again. And this time, you catch sight of the other workers. 2 boys no older than 12 scrubbing bundles of bristles with coarse cloth, and an old man using tongs to dip brushes into a smaller copper pot filled with bubbling lye. The tools here aren't delicate. There are no brushes for cleaning brushes. Just fire, boiling liquid, and salt. You hear the hissing before you see the reason. Another worker tosses a handful of coarse bristles into a metal basin and douses them with vinegar. It reacts with the leftover lye, and steam bursts forth like a magician's trick gone wrong. The smell is educational. Your sinuses learn something new, something they'd like to forget. The woman finally steps away from her paddle. Want to learn? She asks, not waiting for your answer. She presses a set of tongs into your hand, rusty, bent, and warm to the touch. Pick one, she says, pointing to a bundle of untreated brushes that look more like brooms for mice. You hesitate. Are these clean? She gives a bark of laughter. They will be. You grip the handle with the clumsy reverence of someone handed a sword for the first time. And you lower a brush into the bath. It fights back. Not literally, but you feel the resistance, the dense air, the rise of bubbles, the slight wobble. In your wrist. The woman watches as you hold it beneath the surface. 30 seconds, she says. More, and the glue slips. Less, and someone brushes with worms. You're suddenly very aware of your breath, of your own mouth, of every brushing moment you've ever taken for granted. You remove the brush, let it drip, and place it on the rack. The old man nods from the corner. Not bad, he says, for someone with all their teeth. You grin, unsure if it's a compliment. They show you the second step polishing. Not the bristles, but the handles. Thin slices of bamboo dried for months are rubbed with oil made from plum pits and buffed with coarse linen. Each stroke brings out a new gleam, not flashy but honest. Like someone cleaned a piece of moonlight. The youngest boy approaches you with a cloth bundle. He unwraps it carefully. Inside are 4 brushes with delicate carvings, waves, cranes, pine branches, and one with a pair of lovers brushing side by side. Their eyes closed. Client wants these extra polished, the boy says. You wonder what kind of person orders toothbrushes like these? A romantic? A show-off? A dentist with dreams of poetry? The truth, it turns out, is a tea master. One for each season, the woman explains. He claims different flavors cling in different ways. Thinks the winter paste tastes of iron. Summer's too sweet. You raise an eyebrow. She shrugs. Some people taste more than just their tongues. There's a saying, she tells you, that polishing a handle brings luck to the mouth. But only if you hum while doing it. Not a song, just hum. The vibrations pass through your fingers, into the bamboo, and back again. A silent duet between craftsman and object. So you hum. Something tuneless. Something soft. You polish until your hands smell of oil and cloth. The brush shines, and you feel for a moment like a part of something older than you. Something slightly ridiculous, but noble all the same. Later during break, they serve barley tea and pickled plum slices. You sit near the back door, where a breeze cuts through the sweat. The woman joins you, her bowl clutched in one powerful hand. Ever wonder, she says, why we boil the bristles? You hesitate. To clean them? She grins. That's what we say. But it's more. We boil away memory. You blink. She gestures to the steaming vats. Those hairs came from beasts that bit, fought, lived. When we boil them, we erase what they were, turn them into something else. Something helpful. You sip your tea, trying to decide if that's beautiful or just unsettling. Like people, she adds, setting down her cup. Some of us had to boil too. A pause. Outside, someone shouts about a stolen chicken. Laughter follows. The moment passes like most moments here, hot, brief, and gone. The woman returns to her station. The cauldron bubbles. The old man hums as he counts brushes into a basket. And you, still clutching your cloth, wonder if tomorrow you'll polish better than today. Some historians argue that the meticulous oral hygiene practices in Edo, Japan were motivated more by societal conformity than health. But in this room, surrounded by steam and quiet dedication, it feels less like conformity and more like quiet reverence. You wipe your hands, return the tools, and nod your thanks. And as you step outside into the cooling afternoon, your skin still damp from the heat, you realize you carry something invisible now, not pride. Polish. The morning sun has already started to climb by the time you reach the bridge. Nihonbashi, Literally, Japan Bridge is not just a crossing point over water. It's the pulsing, throbbing tooth of Edo. And today, like every sixth day of the 10-day cycle, the market blooms like a fever dream across its planks and along the nearby avenues. Smells fight for attention. Sizzling soy oil, damp radish, laundry steam, sandalwood. Someone's burning moxa too close to their cardigan, and it smells like a wizard's sock drawer. You slip into the current of the crowd, shoulders brushing merchants, priests, samurai, and farmers. Every few paces, someone's shouting, bargaining, laughing, spitting. One man is selling pickled shark intestines with the enthusiasm of a theater performer. Another claims his tatami mats are woven with dream-resistant reed. But you're here to sell toothbrushes. The stall isn't yours, not really. It belongs to an old vendor with a back like a drawn bow and breath that smells like forgotten pickles. He's already waving his arms when he sees you approach. Where've you been? I ran out of plum mint half an hour ago. You set down the new batch, freshly boiled, polished, and bundled in delicate paper sleeves. He rips one open and thrusts it under the nose of a passing woman who recoils dramatically before buying 3. You help arrange the stock. Brushes labeled by bristle stiffness, by paste compatibility, by brush angle. Yes, angle some customers swear by diagonal cuts for greater gum intimacy. There's even a display labeled meditation grade, the ones you helped polish just yesterday, now marked up by 40%. Across the aisle, a stall sells folding fans with painted teeth on them. Not floral teeth, not symbolic. Literal. Teeth. Rows of molars, incisors, canines, grinning coyly from silk. It's art, or trauma. You're not sure. Then the samurai arrives. You don't see him at first, just the quiet hush that falls, like a gust of wind through reeds. He walks without hurry, his hand resting on the hilt of a katana that looks worn from real use. People part for him. The old vendor tries to hide behind a basket of tongue scrapers. The samurai stops. He picks up a toothbrush, turns it over, runs a thumb across the bristles. This is boar, he says flatly. I smell vinegar, heat-treated. You boil with salt or lye, you hesitate. Lye, then neutralized with plum vinegar. He nods. Then, just as flatly. You got anything softer? My back molars are receding. Doctor says I grind in my sleep. The old vendor emerges cautiously. We do have one rare piece. Bamboo handle carved from winter harvest, bleached badger bristle, single batch. A bit delicate. The samurai stares at him. I don't want a delicate mouth. I want a clean one. You reach under the stall and pull out a box wrapped in green cloth. The last of the soft-grade brushes from the previous week bristles. So fine they sway in the wind like rice stalks. You unwrap it, offering it on both palms as if it's a tea bowl. He takes it. Studies the tip. Too much flex, he mutters, but it'll do. He pays in silence. No change needed, no bow given. But as he walks away, he says just loud enough for you to hear, keep making them like this. Or next time I'm coming. For your enamel. You're not sure if that's a threat or encouragement. The old vendor fans himself furiously. Shogun's cousin, he whispers. 3 cavities. Whole city pretends not to know. The rest of the morning continues, with a different rhythm. You begin to notice details, the way women tap the bristles against their wrists before buying. The way children run sticky fingers over sample handles. The quiet nods of recognition from other brush merchants, each eyeing your inventory like a carpenter sizing up someone else's chisels. Then comes the foreigner. He's Dutch, or maybe Portuguese, it's hard to tell under the giant hat. He approaches holding something bizarre. A toothbrush made of bone, with stiff pig hair bristles, so thick it looks like a weapon. He slaps it on your counter with the urgency of someone slamming down a ransom note. Trade? He asks. You blink. For what? He holds up your softest, smallest, finest brush. The kind made for court ladies or toothless monks. You try not to laugh. That brush is for gums, not barnacles. Exactly, he grins. My captain has gums now. You make the trade. Why not? His brush may look like it was stolen from a gladiator's pocket, but it's interesting. Maybe the boiling house. Can study it. As the sun starts to lower. The crowd thins. A mother buys a pair of brushes for her twin boys, one of whom immediately uses it to stab a rice ball. An actor from the Kabuki district flutters a fan and selects a pink-handled brush for a friend, though the vendor assures you he buys the same one every week. A monk buys nothing but asks quietly if you still carry peppermint powder from last summer. You don't. He bows, thanks you anyway, and leaves behind a peach. Some historians suggest that Nihonbashi was less of a market and more of a mirror, a place where all of Edo reflected itself in miniature. The rich pretending to be common, the poor playing merchant, the vendors making poetry out of salt, straw, and soap. And maybe they're right. But standing there, fingers sticky with paste samples and a coin in your sleeve, it feels more like the mouth of the city itself, open, imperfect, ever chewing. The vendor starts packing up. Back in 2 days, he says. And bring more soft grade. These molar folk are multiplying. You help gather the remaining stock. One brush is missing. You spot it halfway down the bridge, caught in the slats. A child must have dropped it. You retrieve it, brush off the dust, and tuck it into your pocket. A small loss. A small recovery. You cross the bridge slowly now. The sounds of sellers fading behind you. And as you turn into the narrow alley that leads toward your lodging, you pass a young boy squatting beside a barrel, brushing his teeth with a twig. He sees your bundle. You see his eyes, curious, embarrassed. You offer him the dropped brush. No words, just a hand extended. He takes it with reverence, not because it's rare, not because it's beautiful, but because it's better. There's a knock at your door. Not the polite kind. The kind you'd expect from a neighbor bringing miso soup or returning a borrowed brush, but the sharp, official kind. 3 raps, evenly spaced. Like the punctuation of a government clerk's disapproval, you don't answer right away. Because when you hear that knock in Edo, especially during inspection season, it usually means one thing. Your brushes are about to be judged. You open the sliding panel cautiously. 2 men stand outside. Identical in clothing, gray robes, wooden clogs, flat-brimmed hats. Their expressions, however, couldn't be more different. One looks bored enough to fall asleep standing. The other is chewing something vigorously, jaw twitching, eyes scanning your entryway like he's memorizing it for a painting he'll never finish. We're from the Office of Civic Cleanliness. The bored one says without ceremony. Quarterly. Oral hygiene assessment. You barely stifle a sigh. I'm not a healer. I just sell. We know, says the chewing one. You're on the brushmaker's registry, which is true. Your name, brush quality, monthly output, and boiling methods are all on file, along with a long-forgotten signature you made with a pen that had no ink. They step inside uninvited, brushing off their clogs and removing a small toolkit from a lacquered case. Inside, brass calipers, a bristle gauge, a tiny mirror, and most disturbingly, a breath funnel. The board inspector picks up one of your polished handles, holds it to the light, sniffs. Vinegar treated? Yes. He grunts. Not approval, not disapproval, just existence. The chewing one has moved to your back shelf, where you keep the boxes marked practice. He opens one, pulls out a brush with uneven bristles. This one's angled wrong, he mutters, mostly to himself. Could cause gum imbalance. Maybe even social imbalance. You blink. Social imbalance? He nods, still chewing. Uneven gums lead to uneven smiles. Uneven smiles lead to distrust. Distrust leads to insurrection. You stare. The board inspector opens a scroll. Item 1, bristle integrity. You stand there as they test the stiffness of 3 sample brushes, run the handles over rice paper to check for splintering, and measure the spacing between bristle clusters. Every so often, the chewing one pauses to smell a brush, deeply. "This one smells like regret," he says. You have no idea what that means. Then comes the real test. The breath inspection. This is a new initiative introduced last year, after the unfortunate noodle vendor incident, when someone with an aggressively fermented tongue allegedly caused 3 faintings during a plum festival. Now, every licensed vendor undergoes a random breath audit. You are today's lucky winner. Open. The chewing inspector says that you hesitate. "I already brushed." That's what they all say. He lifts the breath funnel. It's shaped like a teacup attached to a flute. One end goes in your mouth. The other is inserted into what looks like a carved wooden snail with slits in the side, inside, herbs, paper strips, and some kind of judging mechanism. You inhale. Exhale. The snail gurgles. They wait. After a few seconds, a tiny flag pops out from the top green, with a smiling tooth painted on it. "Acceptable," the comes. Inspector says. You exhale again, this time in relief. Item 4, Community Usage Compliance. The bored one drones. Have any of your brushes been found in illegal quarters? Public bathhouses? Pleasure districts? You shake your head. Not that I know of. He pulls out a brush from his satchel. It's one of yours. You recognize the carved plum blossom on the handle. But the bristles are stained pink, and the end is wrapped in what looks like silk ribbon. We confiscated this from a geisha house in Yoshiwara, he says, apparently used for ritual cleansing. You blink again. Ritual cleansing of what? He looks at you, blinks, chews, unclear. You clarify, that wasn't sold by me. Someone must have resold it. He jots down a note, possibly true, possibly not. We'll assign a brush tracking kite next quarter. You don't. Ask what that is. The inspection ends eventually with a full report. You've passed, barely. One brush is flagged for having a bristle irregularity likely caused by ambient humidity, and another for excessive poetic engraving. But you'll live to boil another day. As they pack up, the chewing inspector turns to you. Got anything mintier? You hand him one of the newer sample Sakura oil infused. He takes it without comment. The board inspector gives a shallow bow. Stay consistent, he says, as if it's both a threat and a blessing. They leave. You close the door, sit down, breathe in the silence. Some historians argue that Edo's hygiene inspections were more about social discipline than cleanliness, that controlling the body's rituals was a way of controlling the mind. But others believe these inspections were genuinely born of fear of sickness, of breath, of what hid between molars. You walk to your shelf, pick up a random brush, turn it over. So much trouble for such a simple thing, and yet, you remember the woman last week who'd cried after using your softest brush. Not from pain, from memory. She said the bristles reminded her of her mother's voice. You didn't know what to say. You still don't. You clean the breath funnel just in case. You never know when they'll be back. As the light slants through the window, catching in the fine ends of an unfinished bristle bundle, you realize you passed, but the real test never ends. The day began with the gentle patter of rain against the tiled roof. Outside, the narrow alleyways of Edo glistened under a thin film of water, puddles forming where cobblestones dipped slightly. Vendors had yet to set up their carts. Dogs slunk under awnings. And inside the home of the Katadama family, a quiet ritual was about to begin, one not of incense or scrolls, but of soft bristles, warm water, and the first awkward sound of a child attempting to spit. Chio was 6 years old. Her front teeth had just started to grow in unevenly, like little gateposts leaning in slightly toward one another. Her mother had noticed this, and so had her grandmother, whose wrinkled hands folded neatly atop her lap as she sat watching from The edge of the tatami mat. Today, her grandmother said, voice like the scratch of parchment, you will learn what it means to care for your mouth, not simply to eat or smile. Chiyo nodded. She was used to lessons, folding clothes, picking tea leaves without bruising them, holding her fan without snapping it shut too loudly. But this was something different. This was about her body, her insides, something invisible, yet important. Her mother knelt beside a shallow basin of water, a small ceramic cup resting beside it. The cup was filled with lukewarm infusion salt water, tinted ever so slightly by a crushed bit of bamboo bark. A few pieces of mint leaf floated at the top, faintly perfuming the air. The brush itself lay across a folded towel, short-handled, densely packed with bristles made of horsehair, tied tight with thread. In Edo, the practice of brushing one's teeth wasn't yet a common ritual for children. Adults, especially those working in court or in service to aristocrats, had begun to understand the importance of oral hygiene. Merchants who traveled to Nagasaki sometimes returned with tales of the Chinese and their methods. But for the average household, brushing was considered unnecessary for the young. Still, the Katayamas were cautious people, and they were proud. Open your mouth gently, her mother instructed. Chiyo obeyed. The first touch of the brush felt foreign, slightly ticklish. It scraped softly against the front teeth, dipping behind to reach the molars. There was no soap, no pungent flavor, just warmth and the faint bitterness of the bamboo infusion. Her mother moved the brush slowly, humming under her breath to keep time. The hum helped Chiyo breathe. Now, said her mother, pausing, we spit. She handed Chiyo the ceramic cup and gestured to the open window where a bamboo funnel had been placed. It led to a clay pot buried slightly in the earth below, where old rinse water was collected. Spitting inside the home was not permitted, of course not even for practice. The funnel ensured that even lessons of hygiene remained tidy and respectable. Chiyo raised the cup to her lips. She looked at her grandmother, who gave the smallest nod. And then, with great care, Chiyo tried to purse her lips and exhale. The result was a gurgle, a slight dribble. The water slid from her chin onto her sleeve. Her mother didn't scold her. Instead, she offered the towel and began again. Rinse, spit, rinse, spit. On the third try, Chiyo managed a proper little expulsion, no longer a dribble, but a short satisfied two, like the sound of a seed being discarded. There, said her grandmother. Like a lady. In many homes, boys were taught to spit earlier than girls. It was believed they'd need this skill for handling tobacco later in life, though that was decades away. For girls, the act had to be gentler, less about force, more about control, precision, modesty, even in the movements of the mouth. Chiyo's older cousin, Kenji, had learned to spit by accident. He'd fallen ill during the plum blossom season, and after several days of bitter medicine, the doctor had taught him to clear his throat gently before eating. That too was a kind of lesson in the body, but Chiyo's experience was different. This was ceremonial. It came with a brush and a basin, and the silent approval of women who'd once done the same. Outside, the rain stopped. Thin light filtered through the shoshi screen, illuminating particles of dust that hovered like small spirits in the air. Chiyo watched them as her mother wiped the brush clean and dipped it back into the herbal rinse. Every morning, her mother said, and again before sleep, even if you're tired. Even if I forget, Chiyo asked, then I will remind you. The words were not a threat, they were a promise. A thread that would bind them, morning after morning, until the habit stitched itself into the fabric of the day. In the following weeks, Chiyo began to brush on her own. At first, her strokes were clumsy, too fast, or too hard. She sometimes choked on the rinse. But with time, she learned to cradle the brush the way she held her chopsticks. She learned which areas hurt if scrubbed too roughly. And most of all, she learned to time her breath so that the spitting came easily, like a little gust of wind. The act became part of her rhythm, Brush, rinse, spit, dry, bow. She even began to look forward to it, in the strange way children sometimes enjoy the feeling of being clean, the scent of something familiar, the mint leaves always fresh, the basin always warmed before use, her grandmother always watching with the same quiet smile. Among the neighbors, word began to spread. The little Katayama girl was brushing her teeth like a grown woman. Some praised her, others scoffed. She'd wear her teeth down, one auntie muttered at the well. She'd grow into a fine wife, another said, folding laundry. One merchant down the street even asked if the Katayamas would be willing to sell one of their brushes. His own daughter refused to learn. She claimed the horsehair smelled like old straw. But the Katayama brush smelled only of mint and warmth, and the promise of being taken seriously. In the markets, vendors began to carry more cleaning supplies: bamboo sticks for picking, rinses in small corked bottles, bundles of bristle tied with red thread for girls, blue thread for boys. Edo was changing slowly, and the children were too. Years later, when Chio was preparing for her betrothal, her mother presented her with a small lacquered box. Inside it was a new brush carved more finely, with ivory inlays on the handle and a folded note. It read, "A mouth well tended speaks more softly, but is heard more clearly." The note smelled faintly of bamboo and mint. Chio cried when she read it. The lessons of childhood in Edo were often silent. A look, a gesture, a ritual repeated until it etched itself into the day. For some children, it was learning to pour tea without spilling. For others, it was how to walk without letting the heels click on the wood floor. But for Chio, it was the moment her body first moved in time with an ancient rhythm, the swirl of water, the scrape of bristle, the gentle force of breath as she spat out the old to make room for the new. The world outside remained noisy, vendors shouting, carts clattering, rain falling in soft sheets. But inside, in the quiet morning light, a little girl had learned to spit with grace. And in doing so, she had learned to care. You are standing once again in the dim corridor that hugs the southern wing of the inner court, just where the walls of carved plaster curl like old parchment along the wooden beams above. The scent of lotus root soup still lingers faintly from the kitchen you passed. You move slowly, not because you are tired, but because silence is a garment you wear now, woven of listening and breath. You are summoned today, not by an officer or an errand. No, today is about observation. You will be watching court ladies at their morning routine, an invitation that even seasoned eunuchs treat like approaching the edge of a mirror. Reflective, precise, and always watching back. When you first enter the quarters of the imperial beauties, you're struck not by the elegance, but by the order. The silence of silk slippers brushing against lacquered floorboards, the hush of whispers, soft as steam rising from warm tea. You walk, head low, eyes cautious. The room you arrive at is shaped like a fan, wide and light-drenched, with gauzy curtains stirring ever so slightly from the summer wind sneaking in. On one end is a row of low bronze mirrors propped on stands of sandalwood. Before them, seated upright and poised, are 4 court ladies. Their robes shimmer faintly, layers of pale green and violet, each fold pressed to geometrical perfection. And what they are doing, what has you completely transfixed, is not brushing their hair or applying rouge. No, they are tending to their mouths. Not with toothbrushes, not today. Today is a ritual of breath. One lady holds a silver cup near her lips. She tilts it, takes a small sip, swirls the liquid delicately inside her mouth, not unlike someone testing fine wine, and then, just as carefully, leans over a spittoon made of porcelain. Shaped like a blooming peony. The water lands without a sound. Another lady is humming under her breath, lips parted, breath moving in measured pulses. A court attendant stands behind her, gently tapping the woman's back in rhythm, as if coaxing a buried song upward. This, you soon learn, is the art of breath cleansing, a form of purification said to sweeten speech and cool temperaments. And here, in the hush between spitting and humming, lies a truth almost too delicate to say aloud. In the palace, a woman's mouth is her greatest weapon and her deepest vulnerability. Words, smiles, sighs, all must be curated. It was said that the emperor once banished a concubine not for her actions, but because she laughed like a goose. Another, more favored, earned her place because of how gently she breathed when serving tea. Her exhalation was like wind across orchid leaves, the poem claimed. You can't help but wonder how much of that was true, and how much was the embroidery of memory trying to please the needle of poetry. The lady nearest you now begins to gargle, delicately, like the bubbling of a mountain spring. The liquid she uses smells faintly herbal. You catch notes of chrysanthemum, mint, and dried plum. It's a concoction reserved for the upper court, brewed in tiny batches by a specialist who is half apothecary, half poet. Each morning, she selects herbs not just for flavor, but for mood, for weather, for omen. You take note. These rituals are more than hygiene. They are choreography, a display of grace, control, and worth. Even when she spat, the floor blushed, a former empress. Dowager was once described in an old chronicle. You had read that line before, but standing here, witnessing it, a woman so precise in her posture that even her most human actions appear divinely orchestrated. The metaphor doesn't feel excessive anymore, but not all mouths in the court are so delicate. As the sun climbs, you are guided to a smaller, warmer room, this one filled with laughter, clinking bowls, and the scent of sticky rice and pickled ginger. These are the lesser-ranked women, laundry mistresses, seamstresses, musicians. Their smiles are broader, voices richer, even slightly cracked. They too cleanse their mouths, but in a different way. They chew on slices of dried persimmon soaked in vinegar and salt. It's a cleansing of grit, not of grace. Their spittoons are wooden, sometimes shared. One woman jokes, "At least we don't have to breathe like orchids." Everyone laughs, you do too, quietly behind your sleeve. There's freedom here, but also a different kind of vigilance. For even the coarsest mouth in the court might be overheard. And a poorly chosen word can haunt more than a bad dream. You remember your own training, how even the sound of your footsteps was corrected. Now, imagine your voice. Some historians still debate how strict these oral customs were. While some records exaggerate the rituals, like the claim that women were forbidden to smile with teeth unless during the spring festival, others suggest a subtler code: mouth coverings of gauze, silent meals, size regulated to specific chambers. One scroll from the Ming era even claimed the emperor had a secret list of preferred vowels. Was it real? Who knows? Maybe it was a joke that grew serious, as so many things in court life do. And yet, amidst this strangeness, you notice something universal. A young lady sits apart from the rest, dabbing the corners of her mouth with a cloth embroidered in plum blossoms. Her gaze is distant. You realize with a pang she's crying, silently, exquisitely. No sobs, no contortions. Just water, leaving her mouth the wrong way. She sees you, straightens her spine, and lets the cloth drop into her lap like a falling petal. The ritual resumes. No one comments. You step back, quieted, humbled. Even in sadness, the mouth must be graceful. The last room you visit is small and cold, with stone walls that smell of ink and moss. A scribe is seated there, an old man with a face like folded rice paper. He nods as you enter, gestures to a low stool. "Did you know," he says softly, "that the emperor once banned onions from the inner court, not because of their taste, but because of the way they linger on a lover's breath?" You blink. He smiles. "Our mouths betray more than our thoughts. They carry the scent of where we've been." You nod slowly. You are learning that in the palace, the mouth is history's quiet archive, recording who whispered what, who smiled when, who held back a sigh. and who dared to laugh too loud. And as you exit the corridor back into the morning light, you can still hear them, those mouths, not speaking, not spitting, but breathing. In, out, like silk over polished wood. Like secrets folded into fans. Your own breath falls into rhythm. You carry their silence with you now, and in the stillness, your day continues. You sit quietly now, as the quiet hum of the palace night fades behind you. The scent of green tea still lingers somewhere in your sleeve, and the faint powdery warmth of sandalwood smoke clings to the air like a memory. The world is settling. Again, but your mind is not. Tonight's thoughts wander not just through tiled courtyards or lacquered doors, but toward the stage, toward the shadows behind painted curtains and velvet sleeves. You're not in the Forbidden City anymore. No. Tonight you are drifting through the backstage haze of Edo's early kabuki theaters, and what a place to land. Kabuki, that fever dream of theatrical invention, where actors wore entire storms on their faces and shouted emotions as if summoning gods. It's loud, it's vibrant, and you, oddly enough, are here for the teeth. That's right, the teeth. Because in the middle of the powdered faces, swirling sleeves, and thunderous stomps of kabuki's early days, there lies a secret tradition. A subtle signal, half whispered behind fans and rouge. The hidden teeth, a practice that only a few outsiders ever noticed. But you're no outsider anymore. Not after all you've seen. It begins with a whisper in the dressing room, just behind the sliding screens. You're seated beside a boy no older than 15, his face ghost white with rice powder, his lips like two painted sakura petals. He isn't speaking, just humming to himself and tracing his fingers across a strip of paper. Next to him, an elder actor is dabbing what appears to be ink, no charcoal, onto his molars. You blink. Wait, is that ? Yes, he's blacking out his teeth. You want to say something, but no one else seems shocked. Around the dressing room, others are doing the same, methodically darkening the inside of their mouths, staining their smiles into something hollow and strange. It's deliberate, it's ceremonial, and it's entirely invisible from the audience, unless, of course, the actor shouts or opens wide mid-monologue. Then, and only then, a flash of darkness, teeth, like lacquered doors, swallows you whole. What you've stumbled into is a theatrical legacy older than kabuki itself. This act of ohaguro, the deliberate blackening of the teeth, had been common among aristocrats and women of status, believed to preserve the teeth and denote refinement. But here, in the world of kabuki, it takes on a stranger, darker purpose. You watch as the actor paints his smile black, murmuring softly, without a shadow in the mouth, the demon won't come. Chills, you look around again, suddenly more aware of the paradox. Kabuki was forbidden for women in its early days, so all female roles were played by men onagata trained to mimic not just the posture and voice of a woman, but her entire aura. This included, of course, the ancient practice of ohaguro, but twisted subtly for stage magic, because on stage, a mouth that showed white teeth was too expressive, too vivid, too real. And so, hidden beneath all that makeup was an illusion. Within the illusion, a void where teeth should be, creating a mouth that read from a distance. As something more painterly than human. It became a tool, a trick of the trade. A secret shared by actors who knew how to manipulate light and shadow, not only on their faces, but inside their very mouths. You drift further backstage, passing stacks of fabric and candle-lit makeup trays. You overhear snatches of conversation, words like grief mask, fox spirit, and broken fan. And always, there's the talk of the mouth. There was a time when audience members believed that a performer who refused to blacken his teeth could not possibly capture the true sorrow of a betrayed lover or the pure rage of a ghost bride. A white smile? That was the domain of drunks and comic reliefs. Real emotion lived in the void. One actor once famously said, "The soul is revealed not in the eyes but in the shadows of the tongue. Whether he meant it literally or not, the practice stuck. And here's something even stranger. Some historians, yes, they're still arguing over this belief that certain court eunuchs may have trained kabuki actors in how to master the subtler aspects of facial expression. You see, many eunuchs were masters of ceremonial presentation, fluent in the art of invisible suggestion, how to speak without saying, how to smile without moving the lips, how to disappear behind silk dot, it's whispered. That one such eunuch, dismissed from the imperial court after a scandal, became an acting instructor in Edo. His lessons? All about mouths, when to clench the jaw to imply judgment, when to press the lips to betray heartbreak, and when to reveal the hidden teeth, just for a moment, to suggest unspeakable truths. Of course, no written records of this survive, just scattered mentions in memoirs, marginal notes, and one offhand line in a letter from a Tokugawa official. He performs like a eunuch's breath quiet, but impossible to ignore. By now, you're sitting in the back row of a shadowy theater, the air thick with incense and sweat and cheap sake. You watch a young actor take the stage, dressed in bridal white, with long sleeves that kiss the floor. The music begins strings, and drums in delicate tension dot, and then it happens dot she dash no. He tilts their face, opens their mouth in a scream so silent it almost hurts, and for a single second, the blackness of their teeth draws the whole room inward. It's not just shadow, it's absence. It's the mourning of 1,000 daughters, the fury of every forsaken wife, the nothingness between notes in a requiem. You lean back, stunned. You get it now. Not all kabuki actors adopted the practice. And after the Meiji era, Ohaguro faded from most public life entirely. Yet among purists, those who traced their training back to the candlelit theaters and secret scripts, the black teeth remained, passed on in whispers like ghost stories. Modern productions sometimes try to recreate it, but it rarely feels the same. Some say the fluorescent lighting kills the magic, others blame the toothpaste, but really, it's the loss of secrecy. When a trick is explained, it's sold deflat, ease dot, so the next time you see an old kabuki print, look closer. If the actor's mouth is closed, they might be hiding something. Something ancient, something theatrical, something uncomfortably human. You return now, in your mind, to the quiet space where this journey began. The palace is gone, the stage is gone, but the feeling, the eerie beauty of something unseen lingers. You wonder, what else history has hidden in plain sight? What other shadows lie behind grins and gowns, beneath fans and stage lights? Don't worry. We'll find more in time, but for now let the curtains fall. It begins with a walk. Not one of grand ceremony, no. Not the kind with golden palanquins or embroidered slippers. Just a quiet walk, beneath the pale morning sky, when the mist still clings to the tiles and the cicadas have yet to stir. You follow the stone path alone, past the edge of the palace, past the tea vendors and the scholars with ink-stained sleeves, past even the laundry women bent low over their buckets. You are walking not as a eunuch, not as a servant, not even as a man of courtly concern. You are walking simply as someone with questions, and at the edge of town, half swallowed by pines and silence, you find your answer. A temple. Not large, not grand. Just a small wooden place nestled into the hillside, its roof sagging slightly. At the corners like a tired smile. The gate creaks as you enter. A line of wind chimes stirs in the breeze, soft like porcelain laughter. You bow. No one answers, until he steps into view, a monk. Thin as bamboo, bald as a winter moon, and barefoot. Despite the chill, his robe is clean but patched. His hands are folded in front of him, and his expression is the kind that has forgotten how to frown. You prepare to introduce yourself, to offer incense or coin, to ask perhaps timidly about the karmic weight of enamel. But he speaks first. and his voice is like the sweep of a broom on dry stone. Your teeth, he says gently, carry more dust than your shoes. You blink. You're unsure whether he's speaking in metaphor or insult. But he smiles, serene and amused, and gestures for you to follow. You do. He leads you not to a shrine, but to a tiny washroom tucked behind a mossy corridor. There's a wooden bench, a chipped mirror, a basin filled with water so cold it steals your breath. And laid neatly on a cloth, a set of bamboo toothbrushes hand-carved and softened at the tip. You came here for answers, the monk says, but your mouth came for something else. You feel foolish. But then he picks up a brush, dips it in salt, and begins to hum. Sit, he says, and listen with your molars. He begins slowly, a brushing rhythm unlike any you've known, circular, light, and almost meditative. Each stroke is done not for cleanliness alone, but with intent, with stillness. He explains in that calm voice of his that this is Kadu, Yoku, the practice of cleansing the self through the cleansing of the mouth. It is said, he tells you, that the mouth is the threshold between thought and action. What you say shapes your world, but what lives behind your teeth unspoken, festering, shapes your spirit. You are not sure what to believe, but as you begin brushing, copying his motion, you feel something change. It isn't like the courts. Rigorous dental rituals. There's no hawthorn rinse, no powdered coral or ground deer antler. Here, it's simple: salt, bamboo, and breath. And the breath matters. You are to inhale slowly through the nose and exhale as you brush, emptying not just the mouth, but the mind. Each stroke scrapes not only plaque, but old regrets. Each rinse is a letting go of yesterday's gossip, of that insult muttered under your breath, of the name you spoke with too much longing. He teaches you a mantra to whisper inwardly as you brush. What enters, I welcome. What leaves, I release. You repeat it, and suddenly, you begin to understand. The monk pauses to explain the energetic anatomy of the mouth, how in certain forms of early Chinese medicine and Buddhist practice, the tongue is thought to reflect the state of the internal organs, and the molars curiously reflect the past. Each tooth is an ancestor, he says. He smiles again, showing his own remarkably white despite the years. Neglect them, and they rot. But care for them, and the dead smile through you. It sounds absurd, yet in that quiet room with pine needles tapping the window, it feels true. He even speaks of dreams, how certain monks trained to achieve lucidity began each day with a precise brushing routine to align the body's energy. Clean teeth invite clean visions, he says, and monks dream no nightmares when the mouth is quiet. You wonder then, if the whole palace might sleep better if the eunuchs brushed not just their canines, but their conscience. After some time, the lesson ends. He offers you tea green, cleansing, and a simple bowl of rice. You eat in silence, the flavors brighter somehow, as if the act of brushing has awakened your tongue. When you stand to leave, he gives you a gift, a brush carved from a single stalk of bamboo, its bristles hand-split with care. It is bound in faded string, and at the end of the handle, burned gently into the wood, is a character you've never seen before. You ask him what it means. He looks out the window, toward the mist curling through the trees. It means, he says softly, remember your mouth is part of your prayer. As you walk back toward the city, toward the stench and rustle of daily court life, you feel something new in the space behind your lips. Not just salt, not just bamboo, but calm, a small stillness. And as you pass others, the guards, the cooks, the gossips whispering beneath silk fans, you realize how loud most mouths are, and how much power lies in keeping yours gentle. That night, in your shared dormitory, long after the candles burn low, you sit alone at the basin. You draw the bamboo brush from its cloth, dip it in the salt, and begin the motion just as he taught you. Circular, slow, forgiving. You mouth the words. What enters, I welcome. What leaves I release. And for the first time in a long time, you fall asleep with a smile not worn for duty, but real quiet and clean, like the moon behind clouds. The scroll was not meant to be found. It had slipped behind a cabinet, or perhaps had been placed there deliberately tucked beneath lacquered boxes of rouge and old love poems that no longer held a voice. You were cleaning the chamber of a former courtesan who had long since vanished from the palace registry. No one spoke her name. Her mirror was shrouded in a cloth, her cushions left untouched. Dust and silence had become her only guests. You were not supposed to open the drawers. But then again, you were not supposed to feel curiosity either. And yet, there it was, a tightly rolled scroll, sealed with a faded ribbon. Not lacquered, not gold. Just soft mulberry paper, aged at the edges and fragrant with camphor and crushed jasmine. Written across the surface in delicate brushstrokes, formulas for the preservation of grace, to be used only by those who kiss without speaking. You do not kiss. That much is certain, but something in the phrasing lingered like a scent. You untie the ribbon and begin to read. The recipes within do not resemble the court's official hygiene practices. There are no exact proportions, no imperial endorsements. What you find is something else: personal, poetic, and strangely intimate. Each toothpaste blend is named not for the mouth, but for emotion. The first is called Regret at Dawn. It begins with crushed coral, ground fine between silk and stone. It is said to retain the heat of long-kept secrets. To this, one must add a drop of plum vinegar, extracted from the skin of pickled umeboshi, the kind courtesans once chewed before kissing their lovers, to sweeten their breath and sharpen their parting words. The instructions read, mix with care. The coral remembers every lie you told before breakfast. Another formula is titled Letter Never Sent. This one is darker. The primary ingredient, charcoal from burnt rice paper, preferably paper that once held a love letter never delivered. It must be burned at night, alone, and crushed using only the weight of one's palm, not a pestle, never a blade. The text continues, add powdered lotus root to remind you that ash can float. Add crushed mint, only if the letter was written in spring. You find yourself stunned not just by the recipe, but by the voice that wrote it. It does not instruct. It whispers that other blends include silence in reed ink, made from dried safflower petals, powdered pearl, and a pinch of ground cinnabar used sparingly for both color and caution. Meant to be used only on days when one must speak, but dare not say too much. Fifth night alone requires the dust from an old silk sleeve, lavender soaked in dew collected at midnight, and the inner skin of a ripe fig. Allegedly, this blend prevents dreams of those who've left. Memory behind the lip, made with honey ash, fermented bamboo sap, and a single clove hidden under the tongue before bed. You wonder, as you turn the scroll in your hands, whether this was merely a game, a courtesan's amusement, a coded diary written in ingredients and breath, or perhaps it was medicine, not for the teeth, but for the ache that lives just behind them. One passage is written more carefully than the others, as though the brush trembled when it passed over the page. It reads, "The mouth is not a battlefield, but it remembers every war you tried not to start. Treat it with kindness, even when you cannot do the same for the heart." You pause at that. You think of the things you've been forced to say in the court, the truths you've swallowed, the names you've forgotten how to say. Later that night, you find yourself alone in your dormitory. The scroll hidden within your robes. You fetch a small bowl, some pickled plum skin, a pinch of incense ash from the offering table. You have no coral, no pearl, but you add salt and a drop of wintergreen oil. A quiet substitute. You crush it slowly, mixing with the flat of a chopstick until the paste begins to shine faintly in. The candlelight. Not a color exactly, but a mood dot when you raise it to your mouth. The scent is like nostalgia. You brush not quickly, Not thoroughly, but thoughtfully. Each stroke a line of a letter never written. Each swirl on your tongue, a syllable never spoken aloud. The next day, someone notices. A fellow attendant, passing you in the corridor, leans in slightly and sniffs. You smell like dried plum blossoms, he says, squinting. Then he adds, or heartbreak. You do not reply, only smile. And keep walking. Inside your sleeve, you carry the scroll still. And that night, when the lamps flicker and the halls fall silent, you plan to try the next recipe. It is titled, The Taste of Goodbye Without Bitterness. You are ready. It begins in the smoky hush of a tea house, low beams, lacquered tables, and a single paper lantern that trembles with every gust of wind from outside. You're there on an errand for herbal rinse powder, sent to the apothecary next door. But it's cold, and the warm clink of teacups draws you inside. Just for a moment, the room smells of roasted barley and tobacco leaf. Elderly men huddle over tiny tables, steaming cups before them, some asleep with their mouths half open like sagging fans, others mumbling into their beards. No one notices you at first. You're just a servant, a shadow in gray silk, a whisper. Between obligations. But then a voice rises, not loud, but sharp, cracked like old porcelain. I lost 6 teeth that winter, says the first old man, raising a crooked finger. 3 in a single week. 1 snapped while I bit through frozen radish. 1 shattered when I tried to smile at my wife. And 1 vanished in my sleep. The second man, across the table, scoffs. 6? That's it. He leans forward, the light catching the gold tooth he'd likely stolen or won in a bet. Try 11. I had to mush my rice through cloth for a month. Couldn't even whistle to call my dog. A lie, says the first, wagging a finger. You never had a dog, you only had debt. And so it begins. You realize this is no ordinary quarrel. It's a duel. Not with swords, not with fists, but with memories and missing teeth. Each man, perhaps sensing the absurdity, leans deeper into the game. Around them, others stir, sipping tea more slowly, pretending not to listen. But everyone is listening. Even you. They begin to trade tailies like moves on a go board. Mine came out in blood, the first says, wiping his mouth with ceremony. A winter so cold, the well froze solid. I tried to chew salted eel jerky, and it cracked my molar clean in 2. The sound echoed in my skull for a week. The second grins, an almost toothless grin. I was boiling the eel, not chewing it. And I still lost more than you. My wife kept the teeth in a jar. She thought they'd bring luck. What did they bring? Silence, blessed silence. There's rhythm to their storytelling, like waves lapping against memory's shore. You sit quietly on a stool, arms folded, listening not for truth, but for feeling. One claims to have tied string to his molar, and yanked it with the weight of a falling teacup. The other swears his incisor fell out when he sneezed during court. Prayer. They talk about the great blister winter, a season so cold the river cracked like glass, and courtiers stuffed wool in their sleeves just to survive the icy drafts between palace doors. But the teeth? The teeth were the real casualties. Not in battle, not in sickness, but in small daily defeats. Stale rice, too hot broth, laughter that split the jaw, sobs muffled behind sleeves. You begin to imagine your own future mouth. What stories would your teeth tell? Would they remember the bitterness of powdered rinse? The clench of forced smiles? The taste of names you could never say? You think of the monk who taught you brushing, of the courtesan scroll with its poems disguised as paste, and now these 2 old men, competing not for pride, but for the right to say, I lived through it, and I still have a voice, even if that voice whistles through gums. The tea grows cold, but the stories burn brighter. A younger man, perhaps the son of one, joins in with a laugh. My father told me he once bit through a pipe stem by mistake. Thought it was a turnip. Wasn't a mistake, the father grunts. Just tasted better than her cooking. Everyone chuckles. The duel softens into camaraderie. They raise their cups not in victory, but in survival. To teeth that fell, says one. To the ones that remain, says the other. You're moved in a way you didn't expect. These were not warriors. Not officials. Just old men who had lived long enough to lose things. And to remember. You rise quietly, bow to the room, and step out into the street. Scroll still hidden in your sleeve. The apothecary will wonder why the powder smells of barley tea. And stories, but you will not explain. Instead, you run your tongue across your own teeth, each one a soldier, still standing, for now. It was the kind of night only the river knew how to keep soft, cool, and half-silvered by the moonlight, drifting like spilled milk across the surface. The air was hushed, touched by a fine mist rising from the canal, wrapping the wooden docks in something close to a dream. It was the hour of the rat, when even the inns went quiet, and only the oars and distant frogs dared speak. You stood barefoot in the belly of the little boat, its timbers creaking beneath your weight. A lantern swung gently from the prow, its paper shade painted with a single character. Rang, tooth. You hadn't painted it yourself. That was Master Kian's work, the old man who owned the boat and had once been a barber for minor court musicians. Now retired, he peddled toothbrushes instead. You, meanwhile, had been hired for the quiet nights. To keep the boat from drifting too far, he said. To call out softly to passing boats. And to sell when the mood is right. It was a peculiar business, this nighttime drifting. Along the banks of the canal, willow branches dipped their long fingers into the water. The current was lazy, like the breath of someone half asleep. But the boats that passed were never without secrets. A pair of lovers lying low under reed mats, faces barely visible. A fisherman, awake and alert, eyes glinting as if he spoke to ghosts. A child curled beside his father, snoring softly, his fishing pole still tied to his ankle. You never shouted. You whispered. Brushes of wild boar hair, fine as silk. Handles carved from peach wood, some still warm with sun. For teeth that want to stay, sometimes they drifted closer. Other times they didn't. You had a basket of brushes at your side, each one tied with a ribbon of color. Blue for stiff bristles, yellow for medium, red for soft as breath, Kian claimed. Good for court ladies or lovers with secrets. You'd once sold a red ribbon brush to a man with trembling hands. He said nothing, but pressed a coin into your palm and held the brush close to his chest like a letter. You still wondered what memory it carried. Then there was the fisherman with a missing front tooth. He asked if the brushes came with paste. You offered him a packet of ground rice husk and crushed mint leaf. He grinned, as if tasting his childhood again. Sometimes, in the quietest part of the night, when the canal was still and the sky perfectly empty of clouds, you would brush your own teeth. In the reflection of the moon, you kept your own brush tucked into your sash, one of the ribbon kind. A gift from Kian. He had said nothing when he gave it to you, only tapped your chest with a finger and said, "You need softness too." You would dip it into a little porcelain bowl, fill it with river water, and scrub in slow, meditative circles, not just for hygiene, but for silence, for stillness, for the memory of someone who once told you, "Clean teeth carry clean words." Tonight, the canal felt different. There were more boats, more voices though hushed. Somewhere upstream, a zither was playing, barely audible as if plucked by a ghost. You sat on your knees and looked down at your basket. Only 5 brushes remained. Then you saw them, a flat-bottomed boat, barely moving, with a man sitting at the front and a woman behind him, her hair undone. They weren't talking, just drifting. You lifted the lantern slightly, so its soft glow reached their hull. They turned their heads. You whispered, "Soft brushes for quiet mouths." The woman nodded. The boat drew closer. She reached out. a coin in one hand, and with the other, selected a red-ribboned brush. You didn't speak. She didn't either. As they drifted away again, she held the brush in both hands like a prayer. Hours passed. A courier boat glided by with the insignia of a minor lord. No one looked your way. Then an old man in rags, his skiff tied with bones. And fish heads paddled past, mumbling a song to himself. You gave him a brush for free. He didn't notice, but took it anyway. And finally the hour turned. You looked up. The moon was lower now, yellowing near the horizon. The mist grew heavier, curling like breath along the planks. Somewhere, a temple bell rang once low and long. You began to paddle back toward shore. The boathouse was just a crooked hut, lit by one dim oil lamp. Kian was there, asleep under a mound of blankets, a brush clutched in one hand like a child's toy. You set the empty basket beside him, bowed lightly, and returned to the boat. Before sleep, you brushed your teeth again. 3 strokes left. 3 right, small circles for the front, soft pressure for the back. You hummed to yourself, a lullaby with no words, and for a brief moment, it felt like the entire river was brushing its teeth with you. You drifted into sleep with clean breath and cleaner dreams. Out on the canal, the water went on whispering, keeping its promise to the night. You had just finished your morning brushing 27 strokes exactly, as per the monk's instructions. When the summons arrived, it came not as a whisper on the wind, nor a respectful note folded in gold-trimmed rice paper. No, it came as thunder, 3 sharp raps at the gate, followed by the bark of a courier with breath that smelled of fermented soybeans and the urgency of someone who knew that a late message meant heads might roll. By order of the shogun, he sighed, pushing a lacquered scroll into your chest. You have 3 days. Brush soft, or bleed. You didn't open the scroll until the courier's sandals had vanished into the dust. The seal had the mark of the Ministry of Tongue in Tutha. Surprisingly influential office, if you knew your court etiquette. They handled all matters of oral hygiene for the imperial household, and their punishments were ... irreversible. The message read, to Eunuch the 10th of the Temple District Canal, His Serene and Sacred Excellency, Lord Shogun Ichimura no Takahiko, has suffered considerable gum irritation following a regrettable encounter with imported boar bristle brushes from the northern provinces. You are hereby ordered to craft a brush so soft it might soothe the breath of a cherry blossom in bloom. Should you fail, you will forfeit both your license of hygiene and your 2 most forward-facing teeth. Kindly act in haste. It was signed with a single character, brushed in such fine ink that the stroke seemed to quiver. Smile. You stared at it for a long time. Day 1 began with panic, and a tiny cup of cold barley tea that trembled in your hand. You emptied your brush basket onto the mat and examined the candidates. Goat hair? Still too coarse. Rabbit fur? Soft, yes, but dampened too quickly and smelled of dew. Horsehair? A joke. Surely, you needed something more elusive, something closer to cloud than fiber. You visited the old woman who lived under the Cypress Bridge, rumored to spin thread from spider silk. She cackled and offered you a bundle of pale gossamer that shimmered in the light. It's not spider silk, she whispered, but the laughter of kittens soaked in moonlight. You took it anyway. You tied a tuft to a bamboo handle carved with the symbol for calm. You ran it across the back of your own hand. Soft. Very soft. But would it make the shogun smile? Day 2 brought doubt. You consulted Master Kian, who sniffed the prototype and frowned. Too much softness, he muttered. It'll tickle, not clean. So you added a pinch of wild boar fiber, boiled for 6 hours, then bleached in salt. Just enough stiffness to lift debris from between molars, but no more than a lover's sigh. You tested it on your own gums until they tingled, then stopped just short of bleeding. Then came the question of scent. You crushed a single plum blossom, dried for 28 days under shade, ground it with mint leaf and the faintest trace of powdered pearl. The paste smelled like forgiveness. You tucked everything into a box lined with silk and sat it before your mat. You stared at it for hours. Would it be enough? On day 3, the shogun did not send a carriage. He sent a soldier with a hawk's stare and fingers that twitched like they were used to drawing blades. You climbed into a covered palanquin, cradling the brush box in your lap like a newborn. The journey wound through streets too clean, past walls too tall, until you reached the Imperial Teeth Hall. There, you were led down a corridor padded with mats so thick your footsteps vanished. At the far end sat the shogun. He was not what you expected, shorter perhaps, dressed in white. Eyes sharp and oddly kind, though shadowed with sleeplessness. He pointed to the box. You opened it with a bow. He picked up the brush, held it to the light, ran it across the back of his hand, his wrist. Then, delicately, his lower lip. He motioned for a bowl of warm water and paste. You turned your back. As was custom. There was silence, then a rustle of robes. Then, something strange, a sound you hadn't heard from anyone of that rank in years. It was quiet and small. A breath through the nose, a small tug at the corner of the mouth, the hint of a chuckle perhaps, and then a smile. You were not executed. Instead, you were given a scroll with a gold seal and one sentence. Your license is renewed. Your teeth are safe. The shogun slept well. You returned home under a sky beginning to rain. You set the scroll beside your own brush, and for the first time in days, brushed slowly, carefully, smiling. You could almost feel the shogun doing the same, somewhere behind high walls and sleeping orchids. The brush, now famous, would be replicated, but none would ever be quite as soft as the first. And every time you brushed, you remembered this truth, that sometimes power is nothing more than the ability to ease pain. It began with a smell, not a gentle one like the steamed plum blossoms wafting from temple courtyards, not even the sharp herbal sting of mint leaves soaked in vinegar. No, this scent clawed its way into your nose like an eel in a bucket, heavy, oily, and so fishy it made your temples throb. You first caught it at the docks, drifting beneath the mooring ropes as you waited for the latest shipment from the southern bay. The boat was late, very late. It was a merchant vessel named Quiet Pearl, though everyone joked it should be Clumsy Carp. Given its age and squeaky hull. You squatted on a crate of dried chrysanthemum flowers and pulled your sleeve tight over your nose. Even the flowers and pulled your sleeve. Fleo. Gulls were avoiding the pier that morning. Then came the shouting. A boy ran up from the water's edge, his eyes wide as coinfish. "The brush ship's gone," he cried. "It's in the river." You stood. A ship? Sunk? No, surely not that ship. The Quiet Pearl was indeed gone. Its cargo, and your carefully packed shipment of experimental whale oil-cured toothbrushes lost to the murky shallows, just north of Lantern Point. Fishermen would later claim they saw the boat listing oddly, even before the last rope was cast. Some swore the crew grew sluggish, lulled to sleep by the overwhelming scent leaking from the cargo hold. Others whispered darker tales, that the oil was cursed, that it drew sea spirits, that a brush with bad karma had finally tipped the scales. You knew better. You had ordered that oil. It was supposed to be a revolution in brushing, softening the bristles with a delicate soak in refined whale oil from the ice coast, meant to ease the gums and polish the teeth, with a shine unseen since the reign of the Rain Empress. The recipe came from a scroll unearthed in the ruined wing of a seaside monastery. You had followed it faithfully. Steep the horsehair bristles for 7 nights in oil, rendered from the belly of a peaceful beast. Then cleanse them in salt water at sunrise. They had passed every test. Smooth, glossy, elegant. And now, they were gone along with 5 crates, 2 sailors, and a merchant license. Worse yet, the guild had sent a summons. The Hygiene Artisans Guild was not known for mercy. You were brought into the hearing room barefoot, as was custom meant to keep one grounded and humbled. The floor was cold, stone lined with moss. The walls were lined with failed brushes from years past, monuments to mistakes, bent handles, bristles too stiff, or cursed designs that had caused bleeding, rash, or social unrest. At the center sat the chair of gums and trade, Master Irihata, whose mustache curled like twin fishing hooks. He tapped a single ivory brush on the table. "You were experimenting," he said flatly, "with whale oil." "Yes, master," you answered, bowing low. "And now a ship lies in the mud." "Yes, master." "And the scent lingers across 3 harbors." You hesitated. Then, "Yes, master." He leaned in. "Do you know what happens to those who bring shame to our bristles?" You said nothing. He flicked open a fan. Then, slowly, he laughed. To your surprise, it was not a cruel laugh, but one tinged with memory. "You remind me of my apprentice days," he said. "We tried outer oil once. Everything smelled like wet dog and spoiled sake for weeks." The other guild members chuckled quietly behind their folding screens. "But," he added, serious again, "you've cost the guild a shipment, a merchant vessel, and risked poisoning the profession's reputation." He tapped the ivory brush once more. "So tell me, why should you not be stripped of your license and given the toothless silence for 5 years? The toothless silence, a terrible punishment in which one was forbidden to brush, speak of brushing, or even hold a brush." You took a breath. Then you spoke, not with panic but clarity. "Because the brush was good." You described the experiments, the careful measurements, the bristle pliancy, the cleansing ritual done at dawn. You admitted the scent was stronger than expected. Yes. You acknowledged your failure in transport sealing protocols, but you did not deny the innovation, the vision. You pulled from your sleeve a single remaining brush wrapped in oiled paper, saved by luck or perhaps some small favor from the boat spirits. You unwrapped it, stepped forward barefoot, and offered it to Master Irihata. He raised it, ran the bristles across his palm. Silence. Then, soft, very soft, he dipped it in water and brushed the tips across his wrist. "Slippery," he murmured. Then, lifting his chin, he said, "Let us vote." You stood at the edge of the stone floor, waiting as the votes came in. 12 in favor of censure and warning, 3 for expulsion, and 2 for promotion. Master Irihata raised a brow. "You will not be punished, but you will attend the next season's innovation trials. Publicly, you will brush a koi carp without disturbing its scales. If you fail, your license ends there." You bowed, your heart pounding. Double quotes, "Yes, master." That evening, as the sun dipped into the canals, you sat with your last whale oil brush and watched fishermen mop oily streaks from their boats. A seagull landed near you, sniffed the bristles, and immediately flew away. You smiled, back to the drawing board, but not defeated, because even when your tools sink, your ideas float. And the scent? Well, that would take a week to wash out, maybe 2. The rain had a certain rhythm in Edo, especially in late spring. It didn't come in torrents, nor did it rage with thunder like summer storms. It arrived gently, like a melancholy memory tapping on the rice paper windows, pooling in the cracks, between stones, whispering across roof tiles already softened by moss and time. You were alone in the workshop that morning, the rain making a dull drumming on the clay tiles above your head. The oil lamp flickered in the corner, casting a golden blur over the polished wooden table where your work lay. A scatter of old brushes, each one with its own quiet story. This was not a day for sales. Not even the neighborhood cats wandered out. In weather like this, you sat on your cushion, bare feet curled beneath you, fingers tracing the worn ends of a brush brought in by an old woman 2 days before. The bristles had been gnawed, chewed. In fact, with such persistence you could see the faint bite marks from flat, human teeth. It was not uncommon. People chewed their brushes when anxious, or lonely, or bored. It was a secret shame among some of your most fastidious clients. They'd bring you the brushes wrapped tightly in layers of silk, heads bowed, muttering about a dog or a clumsy grandchild. You never asked, you simply nodded, accepted the brush, and set it gently beside the others in the box you labeled, Whispers of Use. Today, you took your time. The handles were made of polished bamboo, many of them split along the grain. In this damp, even a hairline crack could widen like a sigh. You began with the softest task, sanding. A strip of dried shark skin, worn thin with age, brushed against the bamboo handle in slow, deliberate arcs. You liked this part, the quiet rasp, the slight warmth as friction released old oils. Sometimes you imagined the brush sighing in your hands, grateful, relieved. Then came the glue. Not too thick. You hated glue that pooled and clumped like uncooked rice. The trick was to let it seep, not sit. Like rain through thatch. You sealed the crack with resin made from tree sap and powdered pearl, your own recipe. It shimmered faintly. Under the lamp, you bound the handle with fine linen thread to hold it tight while drying. You murmured a small blessing. Not from any book, just a phrase your master had once whispered when he thought you weren't listening. Let the teeth return, and let the pain be small. At midday, the rain slowed to a mist. You made tea. No customers came. The tea house across the lane was closed. The noodle vendor had gone silent. The only movement outside was a heron standing knee-deep in the runoff, eyes half closed, as if meditating. You returned to your work. A new task now, sorting the chewed ends. You had nearly 24 brushes in the Whispers box. Some had only light fraying. Others had been reduced to blunt stumps, the bristles ground down like chewed rice straw. You examined them with a magnifier, a gift from a Dutch merchant once, who called it a sea glass. Through its curved eye, you could see things hidden, broken. Cores, uneven bristle knots, tiny splinters poised like traps for bleeding gums. You repaired what you could, what you couldn't. You set aside in another box, simply labeled Lost. As the light dimmed, you lit the second lamp. The scent of rain hung in the air, mixing with glue, tea, and faint sandalwood smoke from your robe's inner lining. You worked with a slower rhythm. Now each motion became meditation. A handle turned gently beneath your thumb. A bristle knot was retied. Tighter this time, a tiny poem formed in your mind. Rain does not rush, but still the roof must bow to it, as do we with time. You didn't write it down, you just breathed it. Toward evening, a knock came, soft, hesitant. You opened the door to find a girl no more than 10 standing in the drizzle. Her sleeves were soaked. Her sandals sagged, but her hands clutched a bundle wrapped in green paper. A brush, she said. It was my mother's. You invited her in. She sat cross-legged on the woven mat, steam from your kettle curling around her small shoulders. You unwrapped the brush. The handle was worn smooth from years of use. The bristles had split unevenly. Some curled, some snapped. You touched it as if touching an old friend's hand. Can it be saved? The girl asked. You nodded. Double quotes with care, you said. Most things can. That night the rain thickened again. You didn't sleep. You sat beside the repaired brushes, watching them dry in rows like sleeping birds. The workshop was quiet, but full of tools, of time, of tenderness. The girl's brush lay nearest to you, newly bound and bristled. You'd even carved the small cherry blossom at the base. Though you didn't tell her, you'd give it back tomorrow, and she would smile. And maybe, just maybe, she would never chew it. Or if she did well, you would fix it again. Because rainy days were made for repair. And chewed ends, like tired hearts, were not beyond healing. Only softness, only time, only care. It was barely past dawn when the shouting began. You were still sweeping the front of your stall, the bamboo broom whispering softly over damp stone. The mists had not yet lifted from the canal, and your kettle had just begun to sing its first quiet song. Then dash boots, heavy, deliberate, splashes through puddles. A voice that cracked the morning open like a blade through lacquered wood. Toothsmith. You froze, broom mid-air. The paper shutters trembled as the footsteps approached. A pair of pigeons startled from the roof. And then the samurai arrived. He was tall, even for one of his class. And though his hakama was soaked at the hem and stained with what looked like horse sweat, he carried himself as if the entire street owed him silence. His daishu blades gleamed despite the drizzle. His expression did not dot. He pushed through your doorway with the same force one might use to knock down a bandit. You stepped aside instinctively, palms raised in a half bow. Are you the one who makes the brushes? He growled, not waiting for an answer. They say your hands are clever. I care nothing for cleverness. I need pain to stop. He dropped a coin pouch on your table. The lacquered cord still held the scent of camphor and blood. It started last month. A dull ache. Now it sings when I bite. Last night I tried chewing wasabi root to numb it, then bit into a boiled carp bone. He grimaced. I nearly screamed. You looked at his face stoic, lined, but twitching with every syllable. His jaw tensed with pain, though he refused to touch it. No samurai would show such weakness if he could help it. I cannot be seen visiting a dentist, he muttered. Nor can I eat rice like a child. Then, more softly, this must not dishonor my ancestors. You bowed slowly, deeply then gestured to the cushion beside the hearth. Would you sit, honored warrior? He grunted. He did not sit, but he knelt in that rigid, watchful way sword. Arm free, back straight, jaw locked. You moved to your low cabinet, fingers scanning over rows of wrapped instruments. You chose a slim silver probe, a thin pick of bone, and a cloth soaked in peppermint-steeped alcohol. You turned back and said, gently, may I see? A long pause. Then, with the hesitance of a man untying a family secret, he opened his mouth. The molar was cracked. Hairline but deep. The gum around it inflamed, puffy with infection. He had likely clenched his jaw too hard stress, cold nights. Too much dried meat. You saw it often in older soldiers. You cleaned the area gently, the samurai's eyes never leaving yours. He did not flinch, but sweat beaded on his temples. You have held back screams, you said quietly, more than once. Every day this week, he admitted, even in sleep. Then allow me to scream on your behalf, you said, offering the faintest smile. He did not smile back, but the edge of his mouth twitched, ever so slightly. You began with kairoshin, a needle-like pick to press against pressure points in the jaw. An old trick, passed down from mountain monks. Not a cure, but a pause. Then came the salve. Ground mint, fine salt, chrysanthemum extract, and powdered pearl. Mixed into honey, heated just until warm, and then dabbed gently onto the cracked molar. You packed it with cotton soaked in vinegar and ash to draw the heat from the infection. It was not elegant, but it worked. The samurai breathed through his nose, steady and controlled. When it was done, he spoke. You did not ask for my name. Names, you replied, come with stories. Pain does not always need them. He looked at you for a long time. Then, as if remembering he was still mortal, he sighed. I was told once, he said slowly, that when a samurai begins to decay, it starts with his teeth. You said nothing, just poured tea into 2 small cups. No mint this time, just roasted barley. Drink, you said. Even blades rust, but we polish them, do we not? He took the cup with both hands. Drank. A small sound escaped his throat. Not quite a groan, not quite relief. Just something human. The room fell quiet. The fire crackled. A crow cawed once from the shrine rooftop. Before he rose to leave, he asked a final question. Will the pain return? Yes, you said, but softer, and not today. He nodded, took a small scroll from his sleeve, red seal, Wolf crest, and laid it beside your tools. If you ever need to pass through the mountain roads, he said, show this. Tell no one who gave it. Then he vanished into the rain. You returned to sweeping. The rain had turned finer now, almost invisible. The canal shimmered silver. You could hear the soft hum of a shamisen. In a distant window, you picked up the empty teacup he had used. Still warm, still fragrant with barley. You smiled to yourself. Then turned to the next task on the workbench. A brush from a kabuki dancer. Bristles frayed from rouge and rice powder. Time to mend another story. The journey began before the sun. Even the city's stray dogs had not yet stirred when you stepped out. Brush case in hand, wrapped in oilcloth against the mist. The streets were still veiled in that hour before full light, where paper lanterns floated like quiet spirits, and the river moved with the slow breath of a sleeping animal. Your destination lay beyond the merchant quarter, past the temple gardens and the vinegar warehouses at the edge of the low hills where the bell makers once worked. There, tucked between camphor trees and the crumbling foundation of an abandoned observatory, was the white bamboo school, a place few visited, and fewer understood. It was where the blind children lived and learned. You had heard whispers of the school before, from a tea house singer who once volunteered there, from a traveling monk who spoke of a chorus of invisible eyes. But it wasn't until the spring inspector requested softer brushes with thicker handles, nothing brittle, and each must make a sound when it moves, that you understood. These brushes were not for the tongue, nor the gums. They were for the ears. A woman greeted you at the gate. Her kimono was faded, but meticulously clean, and she moved like someone who had learned to walk beside people who cannot see, quiet, steady, never sudden. You must be the maker, she said softly, folding her hands. Come, we've just begun morning rhythm. She led you through a narrow garden where lavender and pine shared the same plot, past wind chimes strung with strips of rice paper, until the path opened into a courtyard. And there, lined in rows, sitting on small wooden mats, were the children. Some were no older than 5 or 6. Others, perhaps 10. Each held a brush, some wrapped in silk cords, others carved from whalebone or old sandalwood. And as you stepped closer, you noticed they were brushing the air, not teeth, not cloth, just motion. Tap, tap, swish, tap, tap, swish, swish. Each stroke made a sound. The bristles were treated with lacquered tips or shells embedded near the handle, producing faint clicks and hisses as they moved through space. The children followed a rhythm chanted by the teacher, an old man with clouded eyes and a drummat. His feet cleaned the roof of the mouth, he sang. Tap. Count to 5, then the floor. Swish, to the left cheek, say the river's name. Swish. The children chanted softly in reply, one by one. In unison, a poem of motion. You knelt at the edge, overwhelmed not by pity, but by precision. There was no fumbling, no tears, no clumsy reaching. The children moved as if brushing memory itself, each stroke exact, each breath measured. You opened your case. Inside were the new models you had prepared the night before. Thicker handles carved with tiny ridges so fingers could read direction. Bristles cut to whisper slightly when dragged against skin. A small lacquer bead near the base, designed to click when tapped against wood. You handed the first brush to a girl with a moon-shaped scar above her eyebrow. This one, you whispered. Sounds like a fox's tail. She felt it with both hands, tilted her head, swished it once, then smiled. No, she said. It sounds like wind leaving. You watched them test each design. A boy with pale lids ran his thumb over the spiral grip and asked if it was carved from cloudwood. Another held a brush to his cheek and whispered, "This one tickles like morning rain." No price could measure their joy. No coin matched the worth of that chorus. Tap, tap, swish, swish. Later, in the kitchen, as the teacher poured you barley tea and wiped his hands on an ink-stained towel, you asked how he had taught them so well. We teach with the body, he said. Sound is our mirror. Rhythm is our vision. He paused, looked down at his own hands. A boy once asked me what color his toothbrush was. I told him, it is the color of touch, of sound, of memory. He smiled. He accepted that. You nodded, sipping tea that smelled of roasted grains and pine. Outside, the brush-in continued, a lullaby of gentle noise. Before leaving, you placed a small box in the teacher's hands. 20 more brushes, wrapped in silk, each labeled in Braille dot. You did not ask the price. You did not offer one dot as you walked back through the garden. The wind lifted a strand of hair across your brow. Somewhere in the courtyard, a child whispered, tap dot 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 swish dot dot, and you felt for the first time in years that your craft had become not just art, but language. You returned to your stall that afternoon, sold 3 plain brushes to a merchant's wife with bad breath, filed down the bristles on a fisherman's cracked handle, listened to 2 old men argue about how many molars a human truly needed. But in your heart, that soft rhythm lingered, not on teeth, not on gums, but floating still like music carried by hands. Even in a city that bathed in ritual and steam, there was no night like the Festival of White Smiles. It came once a year, after the rains had washed the alleys clean, but before the midsummer mildew claimed the ceilings. On that single luminous evening, every street stall and temple courtyard shimmered with lanterns shaped like teeth, like grins, like open mouths caught mid-laughter. You had polished your best robe for the occasion, undyed silk, stiff from steam, and rubbed your own molars with salt and lemon peel until they shone. After all, you had a demonstration to give, not just any demonstration. You would be brushing on stage. The invitation came from the guild steward himself, a tall man with a birthmark like a teardrop at his chin. It's a good opportunity, he had said, running a comb through his beard. We've been given a spot between the melon carvers and the umbrella dancers, right before the fireworks. Don't bore them. He meant it as encouragement. So, there you stood, just past twilight, behind a low wooden stage strung with banners embroidered in silver thread. Brush often, smile forever. Let no cavity thrive. The clean mouth honors the ancestors. A small wooden basin sat at center stage, filled with mock teeth carved from turnips. You had brought 3 sample brushes, 1 for infants, 1 for elders, and 1 comically large, reserved for the final act. The crowd gathered early, drawn by curiosity and the scent of lotus seed buns steaming nearby. Children perched on their parents' shoulders. A samurai in wine-stained armor leaned against a tree, squinting at your setup. Someone had even brought a monkey in a vest. You began gently. Your voice carried over the hush of the crowd, over the soft clink of teacups and sandals brushing gravel. Ladies and gentlemen of Edo, your teeth are loyal, but not eternal. You demonstrated a circular motion on the turnip teeth, miming exaggerated concentration. The children laughed. You explained how to hold the brush, not like a sword, not like a paintbrush, but somewhere in between. Think of it as taming a wild tongue. Applause. Laughter. 2 elderly women in the front row grinned wide to compare molars. You moved to the second brush, thicker, softer, ideal for the gums of age. You spoke of how even the oldest mouths deserve tenderness, and paused to recite a short poem. What we chew is not the world, but time, so brush gently. Somewhere in the crowd, a flute began to play. Then came the final act. You unwrapped the giant novelty brush 2 feet long, the handle lacquered and inlaid with mother of pearl. You dipped it in a small bowl of toothpaste, lifted it high above your head. And something was wrong. The moment the brush entered the paste, a smell rose, sharp, piercing, unmistakable. WASABI. Before your mind could form the words, your body reacted. Your eyes watered, your nose twitched. But it was too late. Your hands had already lifted the brush and begun the demonstration. And when the bristles touched the turnip teeth and your mouth opened to speak, it foamed, not white, not clean green. A geyser of spicy froth erupted from the carved molars, coating the stage, your hands, and half the front row. The flute stopped mid-note. Someone screamed. Then the children began to laugh. It started with a single giggle, a small boy near the lantern pole clutching his belly. Then another. And then everyone. The monkey shrieked and danced in circles. The samurai clapped. A merchant's wife sneezed wasabi foam into her fan and fell over, still laughing. You blinked through stinging tears, bowing low, trying to recover your composure as the green bubbles fizzled at your feet. And that, you said hoarsely, is why one must never brush with cooking paste, no matter how fresh. The guild steward approached as you toweled off backstage. He said nothing at first, just handed you a cup of cold barley water that you drank. It gratefully, still sniffing. They loved it, he said at last. You're the talk of the festival. Someone even called you the wasabi wonder. You groaned. Was it you? You asked. Did you switch the paste? He held up both hands. No, but I suspect the melon carvers. They've been jealous of our time slot for years. That night, as the fireworks bloomed over the canal and the city rang with music and laughter, you walked home alone beneath the soft halo of lantern light. Your robe still smelled faintly of horseradish and soap. You stopped at a roadside. Mirror one of those old bronze plates and bared your teeth. Still clean, still white, still yours, and somehow the taste of the disaster lingered, not as shame, but as peppery triumph. The next morning, your stall was busier than ever. Children begged for the spicy brush. A noodle vendor requested a wasabi-scented rinse. Even the guild steward returned quietly, requesting another private performance for the inspector's wife. You agreed, on one condition: only mint from now on. You first remember her by the shawl, not the face, though hers was gentle, weathered with a softness like worn silk, but by the shawl, a heavy indigo cloth, embroidered with cranes so fine they looked ready to lift from her shoulders and disappear into the early morning mist. She had been your customer for years. Not often, not regularly, but faithfully. Once every 3 seasons, she would arrive just before lunch, as the light filtered through the awning of your stall and caught the dust dancing above the jars of bristle and bamboo. Her husband, a retired calligrapher with crooked hands and perfect posture, always walked beside her. He would nod at you with the same ritual grace each time. Still brushing? He'd ask, and you would nod back. Still breathing. But that morning, only the shawl came. She stood alone by your workbench, her shadow long on the lacquered planks, her hands wrapped around a small object. I hope I'm not disturbing your preparations, she said, voice low and cracked like the lacquered handle she held out. You looked at the brush. You knew it immediately. Long, worn handle. Short boar bristle head. A dark spot near the ferrule, where ink had once stained his fingers and transferred to the wood. His toothbrush. You reached for it, but she pulled it back slightly, not with resistance, but with reverence. He passed 4 nights ago, she said, staring not at you but beyond your shoulder, as though the air still held his warmth. We had no children, just tea, just habits. And this brush, he used every morning after singing to the kettle. She smiled faintly. You waited. In Edo, the customs for mourning were thick as tatami straw. Clothes burned. Haircut, letters reread and folded into rice paper. Even utensils were sometimes buried, as if the dead would need their chopsticks in the afterlife. But toothbrushes? Rare. Not forbiddens, not required, just forgotten. Yet here she stood, holding it to you as though it bore his breath still. I want you to burn it, she said quietly. Not discard. Not bury, burn, so the smoke will carry the scent of mint to his wandering spirit. You looked down at the bristles. They were stiff, curled at the ends, still tinted with a pale Green paste. He always said the taste made his dreams cleaner. She added, and that was all. You didn't ask why she didn't burn it herself. There are things we ask only once. In gestures. Instead, you nodded and motioned toward the back of your stall, where the small charcoal brazier glowed beneath a dented pot of drying tangerine peels. She followed silently, her sandals brushing the wooden floor with a rhythm like breath. You didn't speak as you lit a fresh piece of bamboo and let the flame catch. You didn't speak as she set the brush down gently, like a cup in a temple. You didn't speak as the bristles curled inward and released a wisp of pale smoke that rose twisting, slow into the daylight. Only when the wood blackened and cracked in half did she whisper. He would hum while brushing, a little tune about plum blossoms. After the fire had cooled, you gave her the ash wrapped in linen. She tucked it into her sleeve. For the shrine, she explained, next to his pillowcase. You nodded. As she turned to go, she paused. Again at your bench. Do you think teeth remember? You blinked. Remember what? She looked out into the street, eyes misting. Kindness, touch, flavor, or just time? You didn't answer. But that night, long after the lanterns were out and the bamboo shutters drawn, you sat by your brazier with a brush of your own, one used, bent, nearly done for. You dipped it in mint. You brushed slowly. And for once, you hummed a tune. The next day, you carved a new handle. Not for sale, not for display. You carved it from sandalwood, then brushed it with wax and a faint line of ash. A tribute. Somewhere, someone had once said, a clean tooth brings no pain to the afterlife. You weren't sure if that was true, but it felt like something worth believing. Oh, we're there when the first notice went up. It wasn't nailed to the gate of the palace, nor read aloud by a bell-ringing herald. It appeared quietly, almost apologetically, on a small wooden placard outside the Guild Office of Domestic Trades. By decree of the Ninth Council of City Affairs, effective immediately, a civic hygiene duty shall be applied to all bristle-handled implements sold within the 3rd, 5th, and 6th wards. That meant toothbrushes. That meant you. You stood with the others under the eaves, the soft hiss of drizzle turning paper umbrellas into speckled islands. No one spoke at first. You just stared at the words, short, clipped, reasonable. The language of someone who didn't know what it meant to live off 4 brushes a day. It's just 1 mon per unit, someone muttered. Less than a cup of rice. And that's the start, another growled. Next, it'll be the glue, then the bristles, then the air we breathe while selling. You didn't say anything. You just adjusted the edge of your apron and felt the rain soak into your shoulder. By week's end, the tax was everywhere. Collectors came with scrolls and seals and faces that had never seen the inside of a tea house at dawn. Their robes smelled faintly of ink and old vinegar. They didn't haggle. They didn't joke. They wrote down your name, your stall, your number of brushes, your sales. And they held out their hands. You tried to comply. You paid them on. You scribbled the receipts. You smiled tightly at your customers and added a sliver to the price. But the slivers cut deeper than they looked. The boy who usually bought a brush for his mother began to hesitate. The fishmonger who once kept 3, 1 for morning, 1 for evening, 1 just in case, only bought 1. And even the courtesan with the jade combs, who adored your peppermint blend, began to frown at the final tally. Then came the boiling. It started in Ward 5, a shout, a brush snapped in half, a taxman's sleeve torn open by someone wielding a half-glued handle like a dagger. Then Ward 6, smoke, a small fire in front of the registry office, fed by rejected invoices and abandoned bristle bundles. Then someone, no one knows who, painted these words on a wall near the river, "Gums bleed, we won't." By the time the city guards began patrolling the alleys, they called it the Gum Line Uprising. You didn't join the violence. Not exactly, but you didn't stop it either. You remember the night it spilled into your own stall. The lanterns, were still lit, casting long yellow shadows on the trays of brushes lined up like soldiers in formation. A girl ran by first barefoot, no older than 10. Behind her came two men in aprons, shouting, their sleeves rolled and their hands clenching tools not meant for fists. "They raided Inaba's booth," one shouted. "Smashed her stocks," cried the other. Then someone tossed a wrapped bundle. Through your open door, it hit the ground with a dull clack. Inside, 30 stiff horsehair brushes, fresh, untaxed. "For the cause," the man said, his eyes bloodshot and wild. "Sell them, hide them, burn them, we won't pay another mon." And then they vanished into the canal mist. You didn't burn the brushes. You didn't sell them either. You placed them beneath the floorboards, between two warped slats, and told no one. Not even the blind boy who helped sweep your stall each morning. Not even the guild clerk who asked if you had seen signs of rebellious spirit. The city cracked down hard. Arrests, fines, public lashings. A brush vendor in the North Quarter was tied to a bamboo pole for 2 days' bristles stuffed into his mouth as punishment. The palace issued a second decree. Defiance shall be met with discipline. Clean mouths, clean hearts. You almost laughed, and then one day, as quietly as it had come, the tax was gone. Not repealed, restructured. Absorbed into a broader trade fee. Disguised beneath new ink and legalese. But effectively, gone, the collectors stopped coming. The guards returned to more respectable streets. The guild printed a letter of thankful conclusion. The mayor's office said it was pleased by the harmony restored. Vendors returned to their stalls. You reopened the hidden bundle and sold the brushes one by one, not as tribute, not as victory, just as necessity. But you never removed the message painted behind your workbench. Now faded, almost lost to time. Gums bleed, we won't. You left it there, as a reminder, as a quiet oath, because no matter how soft the bristles, some days, they still scratched. You woke before the sun rose, even before the paper lanterns in the alleys had burned out. The city was quiet, not with stillness, but with anticipation. As if Edo itself was holding its breath. Today was the last. You rolled up your bedding, tied your few belongings into a cloth bundle, and sat for a while in the middle of your empty workshop. The walls still carried the scent of boiled horsehair and mint leaf, and on the bench lay one final bamboo handle, half carved, never polished. You didn't bring it. Outside, the sky lightened with the pale blush of morning. Mist gathered at the rooftops and coiled low along the street stones, as if even the fog had come to say goodbye. The boy was waiting where you knew he'd be, crouched near the garden wall, just beyond the gate, his hands tucked into his sleeves. You remembered the first day he wandered past your stall, curious about the rows of brushes drying in the sun. His eyes had that same glint of stubborn interest you once saw in the reflection of your own. He rose when you approached. No words, just a nod. In his hands, a little bowl of water and a sliver of salt. You didn't ask who had taught him that. You knelt before him. He tilted his chin without being told. The movement was practiced now, familiar, a small ritual between those who understand the gentle war of daily care. You drew the last brush from your satchel, short-bristled, trimmed in a half-moon shape, the kind preferred by old men with receding gums, and little boys still learning to swish without biting the handle. You dipped it into the bowl. "Open," you whispered. He obeyed. And there, in the half-light of Edo's final morning, you brushed his teeth for the last time. Mint and salt. Careful circles. Back teeth. Front. Tongue. He didn't squirm. The sound of the bristles echoed softly in the alley, like paper rubbing against silk. A rhythm you knew by heart, like the tapping of the blind children from weeks ago, their brushes singing in unison. You remembered them too. You rinsed the brush. Let the last drop of minty water fall onto his tongue. "There," you said, with a breath, "all clean." The boy smiled wide and crooked. You handed him the brush. He held it with both hands, not as a tool, but like something sacred. "Will you come back?" he asked, barely louder than the breeze. You shook your head. Looked toward the ferry, where a thin line of smoke drifted upward. "No," you said. "But one day, maybe, someone will sit here, and you'll remember how this moment felt." You stood. The mist followed you down the stone path, and the scent of rain-soaked wood and dried mint trailed behind like a memory you hadn't finished unpacking. You don't look back, not because there is nothing to see, but because everything is already inside you. The feel of bamboo beneath your fingers, the weight of the carving knife, the way old bristles soften with time, just like people do behind. Edo exhales, the shutters lift. Someone sweeps a threshold. Someone opens a pot of tea. Someone, maybe a young boy with a crooked smile, dips a brush in salt water and begins his morning the way you once did. You carry no tools now, only their memory. The creak of the ferry's wood, the hush of the current, the sky opening like rice paper, thin and endless. Clouds drift, birds circle. The city fades into a watercolor wash, each stroke lighter than the last. You rest your hands on your knees. You close your eyes. The mint is still on your breath. And for a moment, you are nothing but stillness, nothing but breath, nothing but a name once whispered in an alley of brushes and boys and mornings that smelled of rain. Let it go now. Let it all soften. You're safe. The city sleeps behind you. The water rocks you gently. And the story ends not with a clang of steel or shout of war, but with a hush. A hush like the brushing of bristles against teeth, like breath through reeds, like sleep. End of script. Sweet dreams.